once again for checking in here at Word Made Fresh. I am Solomon, that is Shaloma, and we're looking at this matter of Torah or not, continuing in our series of what part does the law play in the life of a believer today. If you haven't checked out part one, that was more so of an introduction where we just simply defined the word law, word Torah, and where we also gave the purpose according to the scriptures. Why did we even have a law? And so if you haven't checked that out, go back, check that out, come back so you can watch this one in context. We're not going to waste a whole bunch of time jumping right into it. I will say one thing by way of preference is that when we go to the scriptures, we got to go to the scriptures for revelation and not substantiation, meaning that, someone told us something. And so because of that person, we trust them, we take it as face value, and then we go to the scriptures to find other passages to support that position. But we really should be going to the scriptures and saying, hey, y'all, this is what I've been told, but what do you have to say, and reveal to me what I should believe, instead of, me taking what I believe already and place it into the scriptures and finding other things to support that. You tell me what I should believe. And so we got to go to the scriptures for revelation and not substantiation. In doing so, we want to look at this matter of how Yah has revealed to us how he has decided to relate to humanity. And what we're going to see is that this is one of Yah's ways. We talk about Yah's ways, the way he thinks, the way he does things, how he does certain things. He's revealed that to us by his word. And one of the things that he's revealed to us is how he has chosen to relate to humanity. And one of the ways that he's chosen to do that is by cutting covenants and laws. And so let's look at this matter of covenants and laws. We're going to look at the first covenant, which I believe is the one he cut with Noah. You can go back to Adam, but we're looking at the first time the word covenant is actually used. And we're going to find it in Genesis 6:18. And the word says this: "And I have established my covenant with you, and you have come into the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you." That's Genesis 6:18. Look at Genesis 9:9. "And I, behold, I am establishing my covenant with you and with your seed after you." So from Genesis 6 to Genesis 9, sandwiched in between those two passages is Yah establishing his covenant with Noah. And the word says in chapter number 9, "and with your seed after you." And if we understand the seed after him, meaning that was Ham, Shem, and Japheth, everyone that's been born on the earth comes from one of those three sons, comes from one of those lines. And so here we have him establishing this covenant. And what we're going to notice is that as he establishes his covenant with Noah, he's going to give him commands, statutes, and laws. Let's look at Genesis chapter 7, verse 2. The word says this: "Of all the clean beasts, take with you 7 pairs, a male and his female. And of the beasts that are unclean, 2, a male and his female." Look at chapter 9, verse 4. "But do not eat flesh with its life, its blood." Verse 5. "But only your blood for your lives I require. From the hand of every beast I require it, and from the hand of man, from the hand of every man's brother I require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood is shed, for in the image of Elohim has he made man." So as you read, this covenant here in the entirety of chapter number 9, he makes some things where he says, I'm not going to flood the earth again. He says, I'm not cursing the ground again. He says that there's a sign of the covenant in the sky. This is what we're going to consider a unconditional covenant, meaning that man doesn't really have a part that they have to play in order for this covenant to stay intact. You don't see anything that says, if you do this, then this covenant will be intact. If you obey my voice, then this covenant will be intact. No, this is an unconditional covenant versus a conditional covenant that has conditions, basically meaning that if you do this, this covenant stays intact. If you don't do this, this covenant will be broken. Very simple explanation of conditional, unconditional. And in this unconditional covenant, we have him still giving what we saw was statutes, laws, commands. Chapter number 7, verse number 2, he says, "These are unclean beasts, these are clean beasts." He actually gave that all the way back to Adam. He established what was clean and what was unclean. But within that same verse, he gives them a command. And remember, in the previous video, we differentiated what a command, in the law was. A command could be specific for that specific individual for that time. But a command could also turn into a law where that individual had to obey, that command for the entirety of their life. Well, in chapter 7, verse 2, we see just a command. He says, take this amount of unclean beasts and this amount of unclean beasts, or clean beasts rather. But we see that statute. These are clean, these are unclean. That's that custom, that statute. We see in chapter 9, verse 4, 5, and 6, he says, don't eat raw meat. That was more than just a command, because it wasn't for him for just that moment. He had to obey that command for as long as he lived. So that will be considered a law. Verse number 5, verse number 6, talking about capital punishment. Yah established that, not as just a command for that time being, but for a law. And remember, this was a covenant that he cut with not just Noah, but his seed after him, really all of humanity. And so that covenant it's still intact today. That's why we still see rainbows in the sky. That's why the earth hasn't been flooded, even though man has been wicked beyond measure. The earth still has not been flooded. The ground still is not cursed, even though man has messed it up. But the ground has not been cursed by Yah himself. And so that is an unconditional covenant that is still intact today. But the point being driven home here is that within him establishing that covenant, he gave him commands, statutes, and laws. Now, the next covenant we're going to see is the one that was cut with Abraham. And as we look at this covenant, we're going to start in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 3. The word says this: And Yahweh said to Abraham, Go yourself out of your land, from your relatives, and from your father's house to a land which I show you. And I shall make you a great nation, and bless you, and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I shall bless you, those who bless you, and curse him who curses you, and in you all the clans of the earth shall be blessed. Chapter number 17, verse 2. And I give my covenant between me and you, and shall greatly increase you. And then in chapter 17, verse 10, this is my covenant which you guard between me and you, and your seed after you. Every male child among you is to be circumcised. So here we have the covenant being cut with Abraham. This one, some can argue this is unconditional, but I believe it to be conditional. The reason we find it to be conditional because he says you got to guard it. When you think of unconditional covenant, he didn't give Noah anything to guard necessarily. He didn't say you got to guard this. If you do this, this is going to be in place. No, he just, this is what it is. I'm going to do this regardless of what man does. Well, with Abraham, he says you are to guard this covenant. This is something that you have to do. And so this would be considered a conditional covenant. Matter of fact, as you go back to chapter 12, verse 1, he says in verse number 1 and 2, verse number 2 particularly, he says, and that word and, that's a joining, that's a conjunction, meaning that what I'm saying to you now is tied directly into what I just said to you previously. And he says, I'm going to make you a great nation, all these things. But he says, but you got to leave. You got to leave the country where you are. You got to leave your father's house. And then once you do that, I will make you a great nation. And so if Abraham had not left, then that part of the promise was not going to be fulfilled. And so that's why we say conditional. If you look at chapter number 18, verse 19, he says this: For I have known him, so that he commands his children and his household after him to guard the way of Yahweh and to do righteousness and right ruling, so that Yahweh brings to Abraham what he has spoken to him. Also look at chapter 22, verse 16 through 18. And said, By myself I have sworn, declares Yahweh, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, that I shall certainly bless you and shall certainly increase your seed as the stars of the heavens and as the sand which is on the seashore. And let your seed possess the gate of their enemies. And in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So over and over we see, Abraham, you got to guard this. He says, Abraham, because you have done this, then I'm going to do this. So those are conditions of this covenant. But getting back to the point at hand is that once again in Genesis chapter 17, verse 10, he gave him a command, and that command was circumcision. And we know, if we study our scriptures, that circumcision wasn't just a command for Abraham at that time, but it later became a law. So as anytime a male child was born in Abraham's household, he had to circumcise him. That wasn't just a command; that became the law of the land for Abraham in his time. But another thing that we want to notice is that when the covenant was cut with Abraham, it did not nullify the one that was cut with Noah. There were still rainbows in the sky. The earth still had not been flooded. It still wasn't going to be flooded. The ground was not cursed for man's sake again. So everything that he told Noah by way of covenant just translated over, and it was still intact. Matter of fact, Abraham had learned from Noah and from Shem. If you watch the first video in Yashar chapter 9, verse 5, it told us that Abraham learned the ways of Yah from Noah and from Shem, meaning that what Yah had told Noah by way of clean beasts and unclean beasts, what he told him by way of raw meat, what he told him by way of capital punishment, Abraham learned those things and he kept them. That's what Genesis chapter 26, verse 5 tells us. When you go and read it, we won't read it now, but he basically told him, Abraham obeyed my voice, my commands, my watch, my guard, my law. He said he obeyed those things, and those things he obeyed, he got from Noah, he got from Shem, plus the circumcision that he got from Yah. And so again, we're establishing the point. It's just a pattern. He cuts a covenant. Within our covenant, he gives laws, commands, and statutes. Let's look at the next one, which you're probably more familiar with. And the next one is the covenant that he cut with Yisrael. And that's going to be found in Exodus chapter number 19, verse 5. Notice what the word says. And now if you diligently obey my voice. Here it goes again, if. So this is a conditional covenant. And shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasure possession above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. Chapter 24, verse 7 through 8 says, and he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, all that Yahweh has spoken, we shall do and obey. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, see the blood of the covenant which Yahweh has made with you concerning all these words. And understanding that all those words he was talking about were the commands that he gave him from chapter 16 and 19 and 20 and all, and after that. But same thing, not a different pattern. And I kind of want to interject and say, one of the things we got to understand is that Yah is all knowing, all powerful, all wise. So when he sets out a method of, dealing with humanity, it's going to be the best one. And so he doesn't really have a need to change it because it works, right? It's one of the things, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, he made it, that's just his way of dealing with humanity. And we see that pattern throughout history. Cut it with Noah, gave him laws and covenants, laws and statutes. Cut it with Abraham, gave him laws and statutes and commands. Same thing with Israel. He cut a covenant with them, and what did he do? He gave them laws, statutes, and commands to abide by within that covenant. But same thing holds true. What he told Noah, what he told Abraham, those laws, statutes, commands he gave them, they just went right into the written Torah of Moshe. He didn't disannul them. He kept them in place. And we know that, of course, because as we look at some of those things, we go back, look at Genesis chapter number 7, verse 2 that we saw already. We talk about the unclean and clean beast, the beast which you ought to eat, which you're not to eat. Well, we find that same thing in Leviticus chapter 11. He talks about the not eating the raw meat. Leviticus chapter number 17. Same thing he told Noah, just translate it into the law of Moshe. Talk about the civil law, talk about capital punishment. Well, we find that in Numbers chapter 35, verse 31. I'm putting these up on the screen here. We're not going to read them all. But all those commands, statutes, and laws that he gave Noah and Abraham, he just simply transferred them into the Torah of Moshe. They did not go anywhere. He didn't disannul them. This covenant he covered Israel did not nullify the one he covered with Abraham. Matter of fact, Galatians tells us that just because he cut a new covenant with the nation of Israel, it did not nullify the one with Abraham. It didn't nullify the one with Noah either. There were still rainbows in the sky. Once again, the ground still was not cursed, and people were not being killed by a flood, even though they were wicked beyond measure. And so all of that being said, we're just drawing the conclusion that, hey, listen, this is the pattern. This is the way of Yah. This is how he chooses to relate to humanity, by covenants and laws. Does that mean that he cannot change that? No, he can do whatever he wants to and still be within character without contradicting himself. And so we're going to look at the next covenant, which is a new covenant. We're not looking at it now. We're going to look at the next video. So if you want to know whether or not Yah has changed his pattern or his ways, you're going to have to tune in unto the next video in this series. And we want to see if Yah indeed has kept laws and commands within the new covenant that he's cut with Israel and with Yehuda. Listen, if you found any value whatsoever out of this one, give us a thumbs up, comment, respectfully. If you disagree, that's fine. More than willing to engage in healthy conversation there. If you're new, please subscribe. We'd love to have you back as we continue on in this series of Torah and Nah. And until next time, learn the word, live the word, share the word. Shalom.